Absolutely. Ms. Herbert? Here. Mr. McDowell? Mr. Bailey?
Present.
Thank you.
Great. At this time, I would like to entertain a motion for the approval of our April 9th and May 14th minutes. We have a motion. Second. Approved. And being mindful of time, let's go straight into business. I would like to ask Assistant City Manager Henry Simons to go over the proposed art placement policy, public art placement policy that the city is looking into.
Yes, sir. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Councilwoman Herbert, City Manager as well. We have been working to formalize a public art policy and application that will help organize all requests that we receive here in the City of Columbia. We have similar practices, of course, with our street naming and facility naming policies and applications. And we wanted to align this process to give more structure through this committee. This process will allow this committee to review these requests and eventually submit to full council for final approval. The public art policy that you have before you is broken down into 3 areas. Purpose, we'll talk a little bit about that, criteria for placement, and the process for placement, which you should, of course, have a copy in your packet as well. So let me just go briefly through the purpose that we have for you this morning. Is to provide a process for public art placement so that the city council may approve various art throughout the city limits. This This policy applies to the placement of public art to include but not limited to statues, monuments, and memorials within the city-owned facilities, sites, and/or the right-of-way. And let me just say, too, that public art, by definition, could include murals, sculptures, and other structures of art that help define public space and enhance the visual quality of the community by providing color and character. So I want to make sure that is clearly defined in the process as well. The criteria for placement, of course, is important. And number one, we want to ensure that, of course, an application is included in this policy as well. So as you see with the street naming policy and the facility naming policy, there's an application that is reviewed and evaluated by the Administrative Policy Committee. So we followed the similar process with this particular policy to include an application. And that application comes to this committee first for review. And under the criteria in terms of placement, any public art recommended should help define public space and enhance the visual quality of the community, not only by providing color and character, but also should align with the city's mission, vision, and core values and you all strategic outcomes as well. We want to make sure that whatever's presented, there is some alignment with what the City of Columbia's overall mission is. So that's part of the criteria. And if it is focused on a particular individual or organization or event, it shall be limited to individuals, organizations, or events that have had direct cultural, historical, or humanitarian impact on the city. I think that's absolutely essential to being able to do this and be approved through the City of Columbia to place this art if it is an individual. So we have some background that we're asking regarding the artist. We're asking them to provide written description if it is a person that's being acknowledged or recognized through the public art process. So we want to make sure that that is in place as a part of the criteria for placement, and also the justification is there as well with the brief narrative and the importance of how this person has impacted the City of Columbia and the community as well. And more importantly, any installation of public art within the city's right-of-way shall adhere to the City of Columbia's encroachment ordinance process. So we do have a process in place if there is already through resolution that allows for that to take place. So that they would have to follow that process if it's something that's being placed in the city right-of-way. As far as the process for placement, as we indicated, the application starts here with the committee. And of course, upon a favorable review of the application, the Art and Historic Preservation Committee will submit the information based on you all's review to One Columbia. One Columbia has been designated as the art agency by the City of Columbia, so that's been done. So we want to include their expertise in this process. So once you all review the initial application, that is then submitted to One Columbia for an extensive review based on the criteria that they have in place, as well as the actual art agency for the City of Columbia. So they are a part of the process, but that process begins with this committee. And once they review with whoever's presenting or sharing or has the desire to place public art in one of our spaces, they will come back to this committee and there will be a formal presentation justifying why this particular art should be placed with their, hopefully with their endorsement. So that is, and then at that particular point, once there is an assessment of the presentation, once you all come into agreement with what's been presented, at that point you will decide whether that goes to full council for review. And before I go any further, I want Mr. Xavier Blake, who is the director of One Columbia, he's going to talk a little bit about once that process and once the application is submitted to them, One Columbia, he's going to talk a little bit about what they do on their end. Xavier?
Thank you, sir. How's everybody doing?
Doing good.
Good. Like you said, we have guidelines set forth around public art at One Columbia. So we would take that application and go through our processes and policies to see if it vets out okay, and then make a recommendation. And by me, I mean Pamela Zelchak has been helping numerous organizations around the city with public art. And so we use our policies that we already have in place to do that. So this would be just an extension of that same thing. We got those practices from other local arts agencies around the country and other organizations. There's also from America from Arts. So it's kind of the best practices of public art policy, placement policy for organizations. I would also like to know that this is a placement policy. So this is only cover gifts of placement of items that are complete. Those would include monuments, memorials, and other artwork. There would need to be different policies in place if we talked about commissioning artwork or having new artwork created, because that's a different conversation. Also moving forward, we look forward to working really closely with the city in terms of getting these policies figured out. But again, I want to make sure we understand it's just a placement policy of artwork that's already completed. That's kind of a gift to the city. In terms of new public art, new commissioned public art, that'll be a different kind of conversation. But this placement policy is something that One Columbia is looking forward to being a part of, continuing working with the city to get done.
And Mr. Blake, when you say this is just for placement and commission work will be a different process, are you meaning internally with One Columbia right now, y'all processing and evaluating that work?
You mean new commission, new artwork, new public art?
That's right.
Yeah, so if somebody wants to do a public art project, they'll come to us with the project, and Pamela can speak better to this. We have different policies that we go through to talk about if is it done equitably, is it done fairly, now where is it going to be placed, the new artwork. And so there are a lot of policies that go involved in terms of a public art policy and making sure that artwork is done in a manner that's best for the public, not exactly a placement policy.
Thank you.
That makes sense?
Ms. Wilson?
Defer to the councilwoman.
Just a couple of questions. I was trying to, forgive me for not paying exact attention, but I was trying to find an email because someone emailed us wanting to place some public art. I think it was on a trestle or a train trestle, which we determined did not belong to the city, although public property. And so for my clarification, does this apply to public property or city-owned property?
This is all city-owned property and also in the city right-of-way. So it's
Okay.
a city facility, city-owned property, or anything that's in the city right-of-way.
And I would add to that, which is the only thing I was going to say, which somewhat goes to the comments now being made. Xavier, I do think, though, even if it's new art to be commissioned and it's placed on city, the intent is for city property or within the city right-of-way, it would still need to be a part of this process.
Correct.
For the council.
The placement policy, yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
In terms of like the commissioning of it and how you go about getting to that artwork being commissioned and created, that would be a different policy to include in the more comprehensive, complete, total public art policies. Yes, like.
I think the council may want to speak to the initiation of that, though, because I think the concern that we're trying to address is that we don't have potential artists going in too much of a circle
Sure.
if the council hasn't first, I guess, blessed it from the beginning to even get to the point that it comes to One Columbia. So if it is a new piece of art, commissioning something, and unless I'm misspeaking, I think that you do want to weigh in a little bit on
Right,
that.
I think you're right. And so regarding the placement of the property is something completely different. Public art placed on city-owned facilities or property, and if it gets through our process, it goes to One Columbia, y'all find, let's say y'all determine it's not equitable, right?
Sure.
It's not if it's something that's clearly racist, derogatory, does not fit with the plan and vision for the city, it would not get off the ground.
Right.
From there.
Correct.
So the placement is still, there's as far as justification, right? And then it still has to go to One Columbia for you all to do your part. Like you mentioned earlier, and I think we're all on the same page, that we will ultimately have more public art policies that go to ordinance after the placement. But for now,
Sure.
I think the biggest first thing we need to address is a process for placing art on city-owned property. And so I think we're all on the same page. You know from, well, I think that we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Ms. Herbert will try,
Yeah.
she's on the same book, right? We're on the same page.
I'm trying to get to the same chapter. We're going to
All
get
right.
there.
I think that because you know the policies that y'all already have internally at One
Sure.
Columbia and the process that y'all have evaluating art, you know it's sound. what I think the biggest concern right now is that there is no policy that the city has for things being placed.
Right. And this is talking about somebody who gives us a gift that's already kind of completed and kind of done, right? Like if there's a thing that somebody wants to put in a park or put, somewhere in the street that they have completed that they want to give the city the place. I think this policy is in line with trying to figure out how we place that in a position.
But I want to put a pin right there because that's the difference.
Yes, ma'am.
This policy only comes into place once you have an approved piece of
Correct.
art or structure.
That was my understanding.
Because this is just purely placement, which means, do you all do the commissioning going through? Because that's not what this does.
Well, if somebody wasted their money and went ahead and commissioned a piece of artwork, and then it would not be approved to be on public property, then that would be a loss. So it needs anything. If anybody wants to put any art on city-owned public property, they need to know about this policy that we have before it's commissioned, whether through grants, whether
Sure.
through private funding, whether it's somebody who just did it in their garage.
Sure. And again, like we said, this is just a part of a bigger policy conversation that has to happen around public art in the city, I think.
But I think we have to be clear, though, because what Xavier, I keep hearing him say, it's already done, it's ready for placement. I don't think it is necessarily ready for placement or already done. I mean, we have requests that come to us all the time. We have one right now for someone who wanted to honor, for example, a family member.
Yes, ma'am.
And place the art on city property in a park. And it hasn't been done yet,
Okay.
but that is their intent. And so I think the council is trying to provide now clarification as to the process that they would go through to get that approval, bringing that initial idea, request to the committee through sponsoring it by a council member and/or the applicant would fill out the application. The committee would endorse it, so to speak.
The placement of the commissioning of the project.
Correct.
Okay.
And the placement of where they're asking for it to go. And the only reason that would come to them is because they're asking for it to be in the city right away
Sure.
or on city property. And at that point in time, they would then refer it to One Columbia, and then the process would continue. That's the understanding that we have.
I think we need to clarify then, because this does not address commissioning at all.
Well-
And I don't know
Well,
how do you all already have a policy
We have
yourself?
policies in place in terms of how things get commissioned, and in terms of there's a public art policy that we have that talks about how you vet something that's being commissioned for public art. Because there are a lot of processes it has to go through, like you said, is it equitable, who's making it, is it valid to be done, and all those things we have policies for.
And so that's what you would do when it comes to you?
We would take it through our processes of our policies in terms of public art for
I
the city.
think commissioning something is different
Yeah.
too than a person, a citizen who has a donation and/or a request to place art on city property. They're not trying to go through some whole commissioning of something. They already know what it is, they have the item, and they want to place it on city property
And that's
in the
why this is
right-of-way.
a
But that would be
placement
completed.
policy.
Yeah,
This is a
and I think
placement
too,
policy.
certainly public art is defined as statues or monuments or murals and other things, but I think statues and monuments would be a different, memorials to somebody would be a different sort of thing than like a mural or a different kind of public art piece, in my opinion. I mean, I could be wrong, Pamela, if that makes sense.
Well, I mean, I think the key is that we wanted to establish this to ensure that there is a gateway at the beginning of the process. So
Of course.
the key is that this committee sees the idea, either if something's already been done or it's a idea that somebody is thinking about, it starts here. So if it's going to be placed on a city-owned facility or in a city-owned right-of-way, then we got to have a process to put our eyes on that, to approve that, and then it goes to full council. So that's regardless
Right, and
of what it is, whether it's a statue, monument, memorial, mural, as I talked about in the definition, the key is having a place where we discuss that in the beginning. And
Sure.
and that starts here. You all are the expertise. You all are the experts in the area. That's why, once they review the process initially, it goes to you all for your review. and to kind of get into vetting whether this makes sense based on, because we do have a resolution, the city has a resolution already that talks about public art receipt and the process to procure policy. It kind of talks about some of the commissioning and
Right.
and those things. We do have that in
Yes,
place.
yeah, I've seen that, yes.
So my point is, we didn't have a public art placement policy where it begins. So it's been fragmented for quite some time. So now we want to govern it accordingly. So we have an initiation that starts with this particular committee, then goes to you, comes back to them for a final review with a presentation, and then from here, it's submitted to council for full vote.
I guess my thing too is, I'm not sure it would begin at placement. Like, maybe it does begin with the idea, like, since City Manager Teresa was saying, maybe it's the idea that comes first for vetting, and then we talk about placement after that.
Right. Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
That seems reasonable to me.
Yeah, it needs to, if it's an idea, if it's, say, for example, if somebody's in the community, and let's just throw out an example, somebody wants to do a statue of somebody on the city-owned property, it's something that they raise money for, it's something that they have done some evaluation with. They've already done that, but they have not, as Councilman Bailey indicated, but they have not come through the appropriate channels.
Of course.
So they raised $100,000, but it has not been approved to be placed on city property. If that is the desire for it to be placed on city property, they have to get permission. It has to be approved. So if they go out and do that before they get permission, that's not on us, that's on them.
Right.
So either way it goes, if they have went down the road of doing what they need to do to establish whatever that art is, and wherever it falls in the process, they still have to come in. If it's an idea, if it's already done, it still has to come to us. If it's going to be placed on city-owned property, it has to go through this process to be approved. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Yes.
Well, and so what I was going to say is, so we need to make that more clear in this document. We need to say, if any person, group, agency is considering the placement of public art within the city of Columbia, they need to, some kind of way to direct them to this policy, because I don't know how they would know necessarily, but I think that also helps. As soon as we hear someone mentions it, then we can prevent it on the front end, the spending of money. But I do think we have to make that, and sometimes you have to make it real simple.
Sure.
Even if you're considering it, here's the application process. And it can be, the way we sell it too is along the lines of, because we don't want you to waste your money or be disappointed.
Absolutely, I agree.
That it can't go where it's supposed to go.
And I think that's something we could add to the purpose.
Sure.
Yeah, we got it.
And I gave an example earlier, that if United Bald-Headed Brothers wanted to commission
Well, mine's not, I can't grow hair, but I don't know about you.
they wanted to commission a bust of my head be placed in Elmwood Park.
Sure.
And we raised $100,000 for that. That would go to our committee, or first we'll have to go through the application process. District 1 Representative Herbert probably would say, I'm not signing off on that.
I could do it for $25.
At-large representative, I may sign off on my own bald head, but for Elmwood Park, but then it would not make its way through the process because, one, it doesn't fit with the vision of the city.
Right.
One Columbia probably would say.
I might consider it. 'Cause
Maybe consider it, not maybe sufficient justification for it, and then you would present it to council, regardless of how artistically great the work of art is, it probably shouldn't be placed on city property.
Correct.
So I think for placement, this is a good place, and then we will develop a more robust.
Correct.
Public art policy regarding commissioned pieces, covering the gambit of wealth and knowledge that one company already has, but that's not reflected in city ordinances as of today.
Right. And again, we do have policies in place that we go through that Pamela's been using, working with different agencies around the city to do public art. So we will use those policies in regards to this policy as well. We got a recommendation from council, from committee.
And Mr. Simons, can we work up some language that reflect what Ms. Herbert suggested?
Sure.
Regarding, I guess to let the public know that if they have any art that they want placed on city-owned property or in a right-of-way, that this is the process they would need to undertake.
Yep. Yes, sir.
And we could probably, after this is formalized, have our PR department send out a press release on the new policy. So just to put people on notice, and we could disseminate that to One Columbia, who could also give it to other arts groups so they know about the process.
Sure.
Any other questions, Ms. Herbert?
No, I just wanted to make sure that we, if we could make it clear that this applies to city-owned property and property in the right-of-way,
Yes, ma'am.
so that when we get those calls, we can quickly send folks where they need to go if it's not city-owned, but just public.
Yes, ma'am.
And Mr. Simons, can you talk about the next steps as far as, Ms. Herbert has another question, my
Go ahead,
apologies.
go ahead.
I'm sorry. So under criteria for placement, any public art recommended should help define public space. Give me an idea of what that means.
So if you, for example, if you have a,
Actually, give
Let me
an
use this
But
example.
it doesn't work. Give me one it doesn't.
no, well, let me use this example.
Okay.
This is a good example, but this is around statute. So for example, if you have Page Ellington Park, for example, we went through a process and we named Page Ellington Park after him because of the significance of his contributions to the Bull Street District. So that would be justification to do some type of artwork that supports who he is because of the connection to the park itself in the Bull Street District.
Got you. Okay. I just wanted some clarity.
Any other questions, Ms. Herbert?
No, sir, I don't have any other questions.
Mr. Simons, I was going to ask regarding just procedurally, what would the next steps be with this public art placement policy with the additions that Ms. Herbert suggested?
We will make those adjustments, and then we will vet it through legal process for review, and then we will filter it through full council for endorsement at that point.
Great. And it does not have to go through our committee or admin before it goes to full council, correct?
If you all are comfortable with referring it out to be approved by full council today, no, sir, unless you want us to bring it back to committee after we finalize the changes. We can, either way.
Well, Ms. Herbert, how do you feel? I'm comfortable with it moving forward.
I'm comfortable as well.
I would ask if One Columbia maybe have a look at it once it gets done and reworked and before all that happens. That'd be
Definitely, we
great.
can do that.
Sure.
Okay?
Thank you.
And after the, I guess, additions made, could we have this draft accessible to the public so they can get an idea? Or is that, Ms. Wilson, or is that something that we do regarding the application process? Or if it's all based, we need to make sure it's all tightened up before it's made public?
I would recommend that your edits are made, as you've discussed today, legal's reviewed, One Columbia's reviewed, and then that final version, of course, will be publicly noticed along with the council agenda. It'll be widely distributed at that point, Mr. Chair, but if you would like for it to be distributed more widely in advance of it going on the council agenda, we can do that.
Well, I don't want to get ahead of our colleagues of the full council,
Right.
so I think it's best to follow the process that you suggested.
Yes, sir, sounds good.
Mr. Simons, anything further?
No, sir. No,
Well,
sir.
with one item on the agenda, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn. Second? And thank you.
Great meeting, Councilman Bailey. Great meeting.